It's me from Skeletorama again. Welcome back to my channel. So in episode 6, which we're at right now of 8, we're getting there, we are going to be finishing what we started with the wallpaper, and we're going to get it all attached and ready to go. So hope you enjoy it. So now, in preparation for doing the wallpaper and all that kind of stuff, we also want to do our trim. So what I did was I got these at Hobby Lobby. For me, where I live, this is really the only game in town for dollhouse stuff, so I don't have much choice. But these are the same moldings that I used as the crown molding for the house, so at least I can do that with this. The bummer is this one here, which is the baseboard, which when I got the stuff for the original house, I got, it wasn't painted white. So I was able to stain it. I'm not gonna be able to stain these. Like I said, I tried one time and God, stain looks terrible over paint, so we won't be doing that. But I went ahead and went out to the dollhouse and double checked. So for each of the floors, it's going to take 3 of these strips. Okay, and so am I going to have a bunch left over? Yes, I'm fine with that. I'm sure I'll use them at some point. The nice thing is you can use them for anything, right? I don't have to use it just for dollhouses only. I could do like a, you know, little one of those shrine type things and put baseboards on. I can do a bunch of stuff with them, so it's not a big deal. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of those. Put these to the side. Let me do 6 of these. So when I originally did the Mad Scientist's house, again, I stained these, so we're just going to use brown acrylic paint on those and hope for the best. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. And these I painted with the Art Alchemy Sparks paint, so these will match. That's the nice part. So 5, 6. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to go ahead and do the brown ones first, just because I never managed to rinse all the black out of there and always mess that up. So I'll set these guys off to the side, and I'll start with 1. And let's see, where's my, grab my palette out so I've got somewhere to put the paint, shake it up real good. And then once these dry, we'll see if this color is going to work. I do have liquid acrylics as well that I can use on top of it to kind of deepen the color a bit, but these should work pretty good. And with these, again, you're going to be seeing this surface. You're not going to be seeing this back or this bottom, so you don't really have to worry about painting it. Plus, it's going to adhere in theory better if you don't, even though it's already painted, right? Whatever, less stuff I got to paint. So I'm just going to put it on fast forward, and I'm going to paint these. These are going to take a couple coats. As you can see, I mean, look at that. Oh, that's super even, isn't it? Looks great. For some reason, yeah, the first coat always looks like complete, utter garbage. So anyways, that's what I'm going to do, and I will come back to you when I'm done off of fast forward. So, wow, that looks great, huh? The way this brush is doing it, though, it is kind of giving it a bit of a wood grain look, so that's working for me a little bit here and there. Don't worry so much about your ends, because we're going to end up cutting these. So once it's in there, that's when I do the ends that are facing out, that would be raw ends. I actually do them black, just like I do the edge of the dollhouse. So I will fix my fingerprint there, and I'll keep going. So there's coat 1 on these. I'm going to find a spot to move them, and then we will do the other molding, which this is a much better quality paint, so it should cover better, but I believe it takes 2 coats on this too. So there we go. So now with this molding, since it has like, I'll grab the, I'm not gonna pick up the wet one, but see how it's got like these little teeth sorts of things. That's why I was having to go in between them like that. And then hitting the back of it just to make sure I flatten it out, because you're gonna build up a bunch of stuff on there when you do that. So anyways, gonna let this stuff dry. I'll probably hit this with at least a second coat for this one. And probably a couple more coats for these. And then when these are done, hopefully our addition will be done enough that we can bring it in here, and then we can do the wallpaper attaching it, and then go ahead and do the baseboards and the crown molding also. And then it'll just be down to putting windows in and all that good stuff. So see you back in a few. All right, so here they are. So we've got the crown molding. This took 2 coats. And then the baseboards took 3. And I kind of like how those turned out, because I think the combination is mediocre brush, very thin paint, because the way it left the brush strokes, I just left them because they kind of look like wood grain. So now with this, I mean, you can really see it on the end of this one. Look at that. That actually does kind of look like wood. So I accidentally did a decent wood finish. So I'm going to set these aside. We're going to let these completely dry before we, go cutting them or messing with anything. And I'm going to go take the weights off of the addition and bring it back in here, and we can start working on some wallpaper. I have brought the addition back in. I've taken all the tape off of it. And there's a couple things that we're going to want to do before we put the wallpaper on, just make sure we don't ruin the wallpaper. And that's going to be to take our outside color and get these pieces and these cross pieces here. On this side here, we've got some pieces that we need to go ahead and paint. There's one more on the other side. And what you see here is I went ahead and put those 4 pieces that were extra from the, what would have been the foundation for the farmhouse. And I put them under here because this has a lip to it, and I don't want to put unnecessary stress on it. So this is holding it up high enough that this lip isn't contacting the desk, so it's not pushing on it, because it's preferable. I like to leave it to cure for more like 24 hours, but I also didn't film any of those other ones. So yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to take this paint, I'm going to put it on fast forward. I'm going to go ahead and get these parts in here. You got to be really careful. So you could put, say, painter's tape here. What always happens to me with the painter's tape when I put it on the side of it like this to protect it is the paint will manage to get into these bits here, so it doesn't really help me. I just have to be real careful. And so when I'm doing this on either side of these, I'm going to be going out like this. So chances are it's not going to go up and over, right? So I'll paint the center real good, and then I'll kind of go feather it out to get these edges, but very, very carefully, right? So, okay, that's what I'm going to do. so I got this stuff here on these surfaces. If you notice, I was really careful on here. I did go over on purpose a little bit, so that way when I put the wallpaper on there, if I'm off a little bit on the edge, it's really not going to be as noticeable. I'm not going to bother doing that with those corners in there because I don't want to take a chance of messing up the floor or the ceiling, which I probably will. So I'm going to finish getting all these parts on the outside that you can't see anyway, from the camera, that is. And then while this is drying, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to fix that one little spot on the house where we pulled the decorative pieces off, just so it cleans it up a little bit. And then I will come back to you, and hopefully this will be dry enough we can go ahead and get our wallpaper on. So we've come to probably one of my favorite parts of the whole build, and that is putting in the wallpaper, baseboards, and all that good stuff. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to do a dry fit again, just to be on the safe side. Okay, so our top room looks good. And it's going all the way to the corners. This is your time to make sure it's going to lie flat, because once it gets in there, if it's not lying flat, you got to make it lie flat. So on this one, again, I'm going to take just a tiny bit off the top, because it's just not quite lying flat enough for me. It's still kind of moving a little bit. Again, this is something that will be covered up with crown molding. So if it doesn't match exactly the top, it's okay, but I would rather it do that, and there we go. That is perfectly flat. It doesn't move around. Watch your window, because if it could look flat all day, but if you move this around and you can see this stuff buckling a bit, then it's not completely flat. Okay, so here's what we are going to do. Ooh, we're going to move that. Okay, we are going to use, you can use Fabrifix, Beacon 3-in-1, Fabri-Tac, whatever you want to call it. It's all the same thing. I mean, I'm sure there's some tiny little chemical difference that their scientists know that we don't know, but this stuff works great. This is an acetone-based glue. What that means is the liquid in it is acetone, it is not water. So it's going to evaporate a lot faster, it's going to dry a lot faster, and most importantly, it's not going to cause bubbles, because it's not going to wet your paper the same way that PVA glue does. PVA has a water base. So the water is going to get in there, it's going to swell the fibers. That's where you get those wrinkles and bubbles and all that good stuff, okay? So what we're going to do is, I got a new bottle out of my glue stash, and that way I can know its consistency is good. Sometimes when you're at the end of a bottle, it gets kind of thick and it's not as, malleable. So I'm going to put this in here. I'm going to put a decent amount in here. And then I'm going to spread it around with my finger, making sure I get all the way up to the edges here, and especially the edge around the window, okay? And then I'm going to place the fabric. That's what I get for reading stuff. I'm going to put the paper on there, okay? So just squeeze it, and you can see, I don't know how well you can see with the camera thing, because, there's no way I can get my lights in here. Are you kidding? So I'm getting it all over the place. Nice liberal layer of it, nice into the corners, and especially paying attention to right around the rim of that window. You do have to work fairly quick with this because it's acetone based and it will tend to evaporate really fast. But I mean, don't hurry yourself too much, right? So I'm getting it in those corners and I'm pushing these down. What that's going to do is it's going to keep me from having the little wiggly bits that you have from having that stuff right there. So I'm just kind of knocking those back. Okay, and then we're going to get this in here. I'm going to sit it down. Woo, come on, better than that. I'm trying to keep the hand that I got the stuff on off of it. Okay, so I'm going to use my other hand that did not touch it because this has glue on it. And I'm going to smooth this down. Okay, there we go. I'm going to get this glue off my hands first. And I'm going to look in here and see if I have one of my cards that I normally keep up here. Yeah, no, why would I put it somewhere useful? That's dumb. There it is. Okay. So I'm going to take this card. I'm going to use it to kind of burnish it out to those edges. Be careful if you've got some that's coming out. If it does that, just flip your card over, because you definitely don't want to start dragging it across your wallpaper, which I may have done in that spot just a little bit, but that's fine. No excuse to put furniture in front of it. Okay, so there we go. And I'm going to leave that the heck alone. And I'm going to move down. I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom. It's really hard to, I mean, on the sides you can maybe like do a chunk and push it down and then do the rest, but it's really hard to do it on something like this. Okay, so we're putting this in here, doing our final test fit. We're kind of moving it around a little bit. Okay, hopefully you can see what I'm talking about. See how I move it around and this is kind of coming up? That tells me I'm not completely flat. I think there's just a tiny bit off this where it's not straight. So I'm going to take my scissors and I can actually kind of see it now. There we go. Just that little tiny bit. Put it back down. Okay, see, now when I move it, it's not going anywhere. Well, it is a tiny bit right there. And this is different from when you had it standing straight up, where you could see it here. It's laying down flat. So I have a better vantage point of it. If you're doing a huge dollhouse, obviously it's harder to do that. You can lay it on its front, but that makes me super nervous. If you've got a lot of, you know, additions hanging out the front. Okay, there we go. That looks better. So just a little bit more up here. There we go. All right, that should do it. Okay, yes, we are good. All right. So we are going to do the same thing on this one. Put the glue on here. You don't need it like, you don't need to squirt a bunch of it right next to the edge, because then it's going to come out when you press your paper down. Your goal is to get it close enough to the edge that the act of squishing it down gets it the rest of the way to the edge. Okay. So again, I'm going to squish all this down, get this up into the corners. Especially pay attention to right next to the windows. And have your glue ready just in case you need to get a little bit more, because I don't have nearly enough by the windows here. Maybe a bit more down here. And again, this you do kind of have to work a little quickly on it. Okay, so now I'm going to put my paper in here at a time. And I'm going to press it down. I'm going to seal up my glue bottle. I'm going to get my card out and I'm going to go ahead and burnish this down real good. Okay, as you can see, it didn't quite meet the corner, but that's okay because we've got another piece of paper that's going to come in and sort of help that. Okay, get that glue string out of there and get the glue off my hands, because again with this it's important, especially when you have this kind of glue stuff, to keep your hands nice and clean when you're doing this. So I'm going to get some of the glue off my hands and get ready to put the side pieces on. All right, so I noticed when we had talked about where the paper was going to go on the top room, I had cut the piece with the flowers out for this side, but I measured it to this side. So I'm going to see if it'll fit on this side. And that way I can put it on its original side that I meant it to go on. And yes, it does. It fits just fine. Make sure this guy's going to fit just fine too. And it does. Okay, good. All right, so now with these, I really don't want to, oh look, it's got a, God, why do I have all these wonky edges to things? Probably because I'm sitting here cutting it like this. Okay, so we want to make sure that we get our flowers right side up, which is going to be this way here. And it helps if it's got a pattern on the other side because she's going to be right side up. So by default, that is right side up. Okay, and we know it's going to fit in here like this. But with this being vertical like that, I really don't want to try to put glue on this surface. So I'm going to put on this surface instead. And it's a heck of a lot easier to manage on this surface. So again, I'm going to go really close to the edges here. And since I'm doing this way, I really don't need to flatten it out as much. These things, I mean, I will a bit, but I don't have to do it. It's not as crucial as it was on that because I was just throwing glue wherever I could get it to go. All right, so on here, we're gonna knock these back a little bit. Just kind of flatten it. You know, you also don't want to have lumps from the glue under there, that sort of thing. We're brushing it out towards the edges. Okay, and then I'm gonna put this in here. Start it on the bottom, bring it up, and I'm going to press it down. And while I'm pressing it down, I'm going to clean my hand off with the glue. That's the part I hate about this, is getting a ton of glue. Now I want to pay special attention to this edge and making sure it is really solid and pressed down on there. Okay, so I have my card out. I'm going to go along and I'm just going to press down. Make sure that's really nice. And see, it's got some up here where, you know, it's not meeting the top again. I'm going to put molding up there, so it doesn't matter. If I wasn't going to, I would have gotten a new piece of paper and started again because that's a little bit too much of a gap. Okay. With that, and so now we have this piece here. I'm going to do this the same way. So I'm going to do this the same way for this side and this side. The thing on this side I have to watch for is to make sure that these are both in the right direction because it's got that little pattern underneath those. So I'm going to set these here like this. So maybe, just maybe, I'll keep it in the right direction, and the back will help as well. I'll make sure the back is in the same direction when I put glue on it. This one does not matter. So we are going to let this dry, set up for just a tiny bit. I did notice when I was in here that there's a fairly decent size gap in there where I didn't do it straight. Now I do have the paper from where this was. So what I can do is see about matching that pattern. Can I? Nope. But I'm going to take my guillotine cutter. I'm going to cut just a little sliver of it and see if I can't put that on there and disguise that. Okay, so I cut a very, very, very thin strip, and I can probably, yep, I can put that in there, and that'll, I mean, if you look super close, you'll be able to tell, but generally people tend to not look that close. Let's get that snipped off just a little bit. And just a tad there. Okay. So for this, I am going to put one little thin bead of this. Actually, should I try to put it on here? I don't think I should try to put it on this. Yeah, I'll set it down here and then I'll put the strip on it. Because that way I will, in theory, make less of a mess. I'll push that little strip right up to the edge. There we go. Okay, and it's far enough in the back corner that I'm not terribly worried about it because I'm going to have all sorts of stuff here. So if you make a little mistake like that, it's not the end of the world. Worst case scenario, you just pull this and use a different piece of paper. So we have let these dry a bit, and these are nice and flush with the edge. The Fabri-Tac or Fabri-Fix really doesn't take very long at all to dry. So what I did in the interim is I have a new sanding block, and I have new blades in both of my X-Actos. So I'm probably going to use this one here because it's a little heavier duty blade. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and very carefully take this and kind of saw along the edge, just so the sanding block doesn't have to do as much work, because on the back side of this, of course, we have some of that glue since we had spread it all the way out to the edge. So this will make it a little bit easier, and just go nice and slow so you don't rip your paper. It's the last thing you want to do, because you just spend all this time putting this stuff in there. And I can see from this side, you know, exactly where it needs to be cut. If you do from this side out, like if I were to go along here, chances are good I'm going to nick this wood. So that's why I don't do that. And same with this one. This one's a really thin strip. So be extra careful. And, you know, watch your fingers. So I have mine very close to where that blade is going, but I am being very, very careful. Will you have to touch up your paint over here? Probably, but that's okay. That's easy enough. Okay. So I'm going really slow, and excuse any noise from the next room over because the other half is sawing through metal. So he's having a good old time over there with some track stuff from his RGB lighting. Okay, almost there. Okay, there's that. Get this last little corner here. Okay. So there we go. Is this straight? Not even. But that's okay, because this will make it straight. So just like with some of the other stuff where I showed you how to put the stuff on there and then sand, you're going to sand from this direction out. Because what that's going to do is that's going to bring over just what you want to bring over. And it's going to give you a nice straight line. You're not going to take a chance of pulling your wallpaper away from your wall. Okay. So I'm going to put on fast forward, and I'm going to do both of these sides. Okay, so as you can see, it is now nice and even. right? So I'm going to turn it around the other side and do the other side on fast forward as well, and I'll come right back. Okay, so now we've got this all sanded down. Everything is nice and flush and smooth. But see how you see that white edge? That's what I was talking about, that thing that gives you that total dead giveaway that you've got paper on there. So what I use is I use archival ink in Vintage Photo, and I use an ink dauber. And you do want to kind of vary it based on the color of your paper, right? It'll still be good for this. It'll give it kind of a vintage edge a little bit. But just like with some of the other stuff that I showed you, I'm just going to go right along the edges, nice and light. All I'm really trying to do is get that paper just to not be stark white. Ideally, you could go along this with the black soot ink, or, you know, one of the other, like the vintage black inks, but it would look terrible on, say, this, whereas Vintage Photo looks just fine on it. It's giving it kind of that antique-y look on the inside of the wallpaper. I'm just barely going to do it here just because it's such a light colored paper. Okay, and then once I go over, if I want to go over this stuff again in the house paint color, I'll just make sure to get that as well. You can also use a Copic marker if you want to get that like black like the rest of it. That's a whole special endeavor of its own. Actually, let's try that. We'll try it on this just because the wallpaper is really dark. So I've got my brush tip here. I'm just going to go along like this. See? And that really disappears it. I'm doing it in an angle in such a way that I'm not going to hit the rest of the paper. So I'm going to do this at a very, very low angle from the back. That way if you slip, you go this way. I'll do the same with the edge of this. Spoop right up the edge. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now those are sunk back into the wall and it's not so obvious. All right, so that is it for episode 6 with the wallpaper. It's starting to come together now and look finished. So in the next episode, we are going to deal with all of that molding that we painted and getting it attached along with the interior windows. So see you then. Beannachd, leibh. Bye.